So Andrew, we're going to talk about the place of religion in a university today. And we're sitting just here, really near to a chaplaincy. That's the first thing to think about, whether universities really should have places where people can worship. Does that have any place on the campus?
Yeah. Well, I guess for me they're an optional extra. They're not part of the essential business of a university any more than a chaplaincy centre in a sports centre would be. The essential business of a university is teaching and research and religions. Well, if people want to fund them, that's okay. I'm not terribly happy about taxpayers funding places of worship on campuses, although if the student union, as a democratic body, wanted to give resources to particular religious groups or indeed to humanist groups, then okay, I suppose.
So you wouldn't get the bulldozers out and knock the chaplaincy down?
No.
That's okay, but it's something you do in your own time and at your own expense?
Yeah, yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think in fact that's the case, isn't it? The university doesn't pay for the chaplains here.
Mm-hmm. I would like to think so.
But if you'd been planning this university, you wouldn't have built a chaplaincy in such a prominent place. Ideally,
these things should be decided upon by the community of scholars, democratically, including students, of course. But it's not part of the core business of the university. That's the thing.
But there's no neutral space, is there? So if you have a university that's founded as secular, then Muslims and Jews and Christians and other people can equally say, well, that's excluding me. It's not as if there's a neutral stance.
Well, I'm not very happy with the idea of defining a university as secular. It's a bit like, it's defining something in terms of what it's not. It's like saying oranges are those fruits which are not apples. You should define things by what they are, and a university is a place of learning committed to research, teaching, scholarship, according to the principle that everything is open for evaluation. Look at the reaction of the physicists to the possibility that those physicists in the CERN lab near Geneva may have found instances of particles travelling faster than the speed of light. Do they feel threatened?
Some do.
No, they don't. They feel excited. Some of them feel confident that it's likely to be false, it's likely to be disproved, but they're excited. So, there's the physicist at the University of, Professor of Physics at the University of Surrey said he'll eat his boxer shorts on live TV if it's proved. And similarly, in social science, which is what I do, if some long-held beliefs are shown to be false, that's exciting. It's not a threat.
I think universities ought to be the place where anyone in our society, and of course, if we just look at British society, the majority of people are religious. They say they are religious. So universities should be open to everyone, religious and secular, and no one should feel that they're unable to talk openly about what they believe. Yeah. And yet I do worry that is the case. There's been a recent survey of religious discrimination on campuses, and some religious groups do feel that they could never say that they have a religious commitment because they would not necessarily be discriminated against, but they'd be ridiculed. It's something you wouldn't want to tell your lecturer, for example. And I think that's really unfortunate. I think we've probably gone too far in a secular direction, so religious people can often feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, I agree absolutely that anybody should be able to go to university. All you need is the academic qualifications, and that should be regardless of religion or whatever. And I think that's important for two reasons, actually. And one is the social justice reason, that it shouldn't be restricted to certain groups and not other groups. And then there's another reason, which is to do with knowledge, which is about how knowledge is most likely to develop if you maximise the number of different sets of experience which are brought into it. So you draw upon, each student brings along lots. So that, if you have lots of different students from different backgrounds, some religious, some not, that's good.
But if someone were, you're a sociology professor, if somebody...
Professor in sociology, yeah.
in your lecture were to say, well, you've missed God out of the equation.
What would I say?
What about the role of, yes?
I say, what do you mean by God?
and they would say, you know, for the sake of argument, I believe in an almighty, benevolent power who's guiding our lives.
Yeah.
And I think you need to take that into account when you're looking at society. Would you be willing for them to be able to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, then we've been into a very long argument, wouldn't we, about what grounds do you have for believing in the existence of this thing, which would, from a practical point of view, would be difficult, given the constraints of timetables and the need to get through curricula. Yeah, maybe we should offer them some time to go into those things. It would actually be difficult to do. I don't deny that.
But it's a worldview at some levels. It's saying every position in the classroom probably implies a certain view of the world.
Yeah.
That it's random, that it's meaningless, that it's the product of evolution, or that it's meaningful, that there's a moral purpose. Those are things that should be discussed in arts and humanities, social sciences.
Yeah, and they should, and there should be spaces for that. I don't know practically how you do that for every single course. Maybe every student should do such a course where they do look at those kinds of things. But do you be happy about that?
Do you really feel that religious students in a sociology class would not be inhibited in saying what they really believe?
Well, it's hard to...
There is a very strong secular ethos.
Yeah, it's hard to know. And maybe that, yes, you don't often hear that kind of thing, very, very, very rarely. And it may be that they're not religious anyway. It may be that they're silent. They don't feel that they can produce a good enough defence of it. They maybe want to avoid argument. So, how you can't know unless they say. But I don't want I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. Whatever they come out with, it's very important that nobody ridicules them. Everybody, whatever we say, we take into account, and we deal with one another respectfully. That's part of the ethos of a university.
In principle, I guess we agree that anyone who's qualified should come, but in practice, I wonder if that's the case. I suspect that there are quite a lot of, say, Muslim students who'd be very wary of coming to university because they feel it's got a very dominant ethos, it won't respect their faith. And that surely is a problem now for universities.
Well, universities should be a place for anybody who's qualified. So it should be indifferent to religion or non-religion, so whatever. As regards, say, a student who is of a particular religious faith, and they feel that their beliefs aren't respected, I'd ask, well, what do you mean by respected? Do you mean that nobody should challenge them, that people should go along with what they imply? So, for example, if a male student doesn't want to be in the same group as a female student, or be taught by a female lecturer, that might be a problem, something like that.
I think it's more broad. I think it's just people feeling that their beliefs just aren't ever made visible. You might feel the same if you were to go to a university which had a very religious ethos. But it works both ways, doesn't it? And perhaps we, universities have, I think, a very secular ethos. Perhaps we've tipped it too far towards the secular, so that a lot of people now feel excluded.
Well, we tend to emphasise beliefs which have been, as it were, put through the mill of university examination and scrutiny in terms of how they stand up to reason, to argument, to tests of explanatory power and so on. And ones which haven't done so well on that tend not to get taught so much. So, you don't get creationism taught, whereas you do get evolutionary theory taught.
The traditions of scholarship of Muslims and Jews and Christians are the basis of our scholarship today. That's the historical roots of our free inquiry. They have long, thousand years traditions of dispute and debate. And that's what the university is founded on. It's not a coincidence that they've got a religious foundation. They were founded to have debates about crucial issues.
But it's also they were very powerful institutions. They had the power to do that. And they've got a long history of domination, of symbolic domination, making people feel bad or guilty, or demonising people who don't agree, excluding them, oppressing them in various ways.
Okay, Andrew, let's see if we can draw the place we think religion has or should have on the campus. Do you want to go first? You're probably better at drawing than I am.
Well, probably not, but social scientists love doing these 2x2 diagrams. So I think I'll try one of those. So you can see that. And here we have religion, non-religion. And here we have dogmatic holding of beliefs, non-dogmatic, but I'm going to fill that out a bit more because for a university there are more positive values. There are belief in openness to argument, the idea that anything can be revised, reason, argument, explanatory power, evidence, and so on, coherence. Anything can be revised. Okay. And of course the obvious question is, can we put a tick in all these boxes? So how about the dogmatic holding of beliefs? Well, yeah, as we've said and agreed, non-religious people can be dogmatic. They can also be undogmatic. Religious people can be dogmatic. Can they be these? Some can, some can't, or some don't want to be, or some are reluctant to be. Some are backed up by institutional power which inhibits that. So I don't want to put that there. Maybe.
Okay, so I suppose if I try and represent the argument we were having, then I would want to put just as big a question mark about here. And I was saying that in a secular ethos that universities have become, in fact, I worry that it's the non-religion that's going to be held more dogmatically than the religious point of view. So my question mark goes there. Mm-hmm. But another way of, I mean, you could do a diagram. Shall I have a go at doing a diagram? You could do a diagram of a university. What's the kind of core business of a university? Well, you would say teaching and learning. But then we all recognise that people also live the rest of their lives. There's a bit of university about socialisation and entertainment and student societies and all those sorts of activities. And I think we've all agreed that religion's got a place in these areas. So the more controversial question is, does religion have a place in the core business? And I think absolutely. I think there should be as much religion as non-religion. I think all belief should come here. And if you have all that happening here, you're much likely to get the really good reasoned argument and to avoid the dogmatism of both these sorts.
Yeah. Well, I'll believe it when I see it. When I see religious arguments and values being opened up to this kind of scrutiny and people being willing, of religious beliefs, being willing to revise them in the face of stronger arguments.
But Andrew, you see it every day because an awful lot of your students are religious and they're there in your lecture theatre engaging in open debate. But they may feel too inhibited to talk about their religion. But they're not hardly irrational, dogmatic people, or they wouldn't be sitting there in the first place.
I would welcome them to bring forward their concerns about religion, especially if they feel that it's somehow squeezed out. It should be an object of study, and maybe there's too much, some people would call it political correctness, but evasion of such difficult issues. We can't get into these things. These are questions of beliefs. Well, that's precisely the problem. We don't want to get into this because people might be offended.
Yes.
And that view of religion is a very common one outside universities, maybe not in religious studies departments, but we obviously do talk
even
about...
Even in religious studies departments. Yeah. I can remember a lecturer whose students asked him, what do you believe? And he said, we don't ask that question in a university. And I think that's wrong. I think that's dogmatic.
Yeah.
I think we should and can.
Yeah. But they're also relativists, aren't they? The students are reluctant to challenge each other's beliefs because of pervasive relativism that any point of view is as good as any other, because if you challenge it, that's somehow disrespectful to the person, which it needn't be, of course. How do you think religion fits with whatever you understand to be the ethos of a university?
Well, I suppose historically, universities are religious, that it's religious bodies that give rise to the idea of a university, and you can see that here in the UK. The oldest universities are still Anglican or Church of Scotland. They've got that religious foundation, but which actually isn't insignificant, because it shows that religion isn't just about dogma. Religion is about debate, it always has been, and that's why it produced intellectual spaces. So it's kind of weird to think that universities are inherently secular. Of course they're not historically, and I think that's as it should be. I think it's good not to erase that history and have quite pluralistic, they've evolved into pluralistic institutions which have a space for religion and for non-religion and for debate.
Well, aside from the problem that many of them nevertheless want to hang on to the religious description in their very statutes and constitution, but what is the actual ethos of a university, never mind the history, today?
Well, I'll say what I think it should be, maybe.
Yeah.
I think it's about, it's a space for learning and for debate and for criticism, and it's a space where every kind of commitment and belief should be able to be articulated and debated. And as we've said before, my worry is that they become rather too anti-religious spaces, so that religious people actually don't feel free to fully be themselves in that setting.
Yeah. And my worry is that that's a rather academic view of religion. That is a view of religion where it's seen as something which is just open for debate, and you follow the debate wherever it goes. No problems in doing that. Whereas outside institutionalized religion, which is still part of our context, as you said yourself, doesn't operate very much on those principles sometimes, but a lot of the time, no. And that is the experience of religion that a lot of people have had.